So if you liked this type of fantasy romance, slight Beauty and the Beast vibes, anything like that, you should read A Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova. Then Six of Crows bored me, and this one did not. But they are very similar, so if you like one, most likely you're gonna like the other. But they both have that like historical mystery detective. If you liked the concept of that one, even if you didn't like the execution, if you like that type of book, hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Sam, and today I am showing y'all some books that you should read if you like books that have been very popular fairly recently. I had a viewer suggest this video, and I loved the idea of taking books that other people have read and saying, if you liked this book, you should read this book. So I came up with a list of like 9 books that I thought were mostly popular, that people know about and probably have read. And if you liked this book, here's some other books that you should read. A lot of these books are very popular, so sometimes you might be in the vice versa category, where if I say if you liked this book, you should read this book, you've read this one already, so then you should read this one. But either way, hopefully you get some great suggestions out of this. I tried to choose books that had similar vibes, similar plots. It's not always going to be like this book and this book are identical, so you should read both of them because they're the same thing. Like, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's a similar plot, sometimes it's a similar concept, sometimes it's just a similar vibe or a similar writing style. That's what I kind of tried to go off of. We do have a lot of fantasy here, but I did try to throw in some other things. So we'll see how it goes. So before we jump into the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and the little bell icon will notify you when I post. I post on Sundays and Wednesdays. And if you are interested in any other videos from me, I will link a few others below, and you can check out the rest of my channel. We have a lot of book reviews, book recommendation lists, my TBR game, lots of reading challenges and reading vlogs, so check all that out below and in the playlist, and let's get into the books that y'all should read. Alright, so we're gonna start off with probably the most popular book on any sort of social media that's related to books at all. I see this book everywhere. I feel like there's not very many people left that haven't at least heard of it, but if you liked A Court of Thorns and Roses, and you have read it, most of us know what this is about, but in case you don't, this follows our main character, Feyre, and she grew up in a world where the fairy world and the human world are kept separate for the humans' protection. There is a wall, like a literal wall, separating the two realms, and the fairies are very dangerous, and she is out hunting to feed her family. She is very, very poor, and they're struggling, and she comes across a wolf, and a wolf is dangerous, so she shoots it, and it turns out that that wolf wasn't just a wolf, it was a fairy, and now another fairy has come to collect the life for a life penalty for her killing a fae creature. So she is given the option to either be killed or go live the rest of her life in Prythian, the fairy world. So she chooses to go to Prythian, and a lot of things unfold from there. That is a very rough synopsis of this book, but I feel like most of us have at least heard about this book before. So if you liked this type of fantasy romance, slight Beauty and the Beast vibes, anything like that, you should read A Deal with the Elf King by Elise Kova. This follows our main character, Luella, and she lives in a world where the Elf King and the elf realm is also separate from the human realm, but every generation, the Elf King comes to the human world to collect a human bride. And the human bride is the only human in that area that has magic. The only problem is, this time there is no human queen. There's no one who has magic, and they don't know what they're gonna do because the Elf King is coming, and they don't have a human queen to give him. Unfortunately, Luella is that human queen, and she doesn't know it until he comes and takes her away. This is very similar to the first ACOTAR book in the slight Beauty and the Beast vibes, the feeling like you've been kidnapped, the types of, they're not fae, but like similar fae creatures, and you get a lot of the same like enemies to lovers and forced proximity and different things like that. It's really good. It is actually a series, but they're all standalone, so this book is a standalone, but there are 2 companion novels now, and they follow different characters in different parts of this world, and they're all really good. So if you liked ACOTAR, you might like this one. Okay, so this one, a lot of people know that I did not like this first book at all, but I did like the recommended one, so bear with me. You might like one of these even if you don't like the other, but they are very similar vibes in my opinion. So the first book, Six of Crows. This is a fantasy heist. We have a group of thieves who are tasked with this very elaborate heist, and they are trying to steal something from another kingdom, and it gets very complicated very quickly. We do get a lot of like found family vibes, a lot of fantasy elements, a lot of criminal activity. I didn't like this book personally. However, if you liked this book, and even if you didn't, you might like The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. This is the first book in his Mistborn trilogy, and it is very similar to Six of Crows in that it is a fantasy world. We do have a heist situation. This heist isn't so much trying to steal something as trying to kind of take down a kingdom, but very, very similar concepts. We still have the found family, we still have the criminal activity, we still have two main characters that are very, very similar, and a lot of just like the same vibes. I liked this one a lot. I did not like Six of Crows, and I can't really explain why, other than Six of Crows bored me, and this one did not. But they are very similar, so if you like one, most likely you're gonna like the other. Next up, if you liked Legendborn. So this follows our main character, Bree, and Bree has recently lost her mother, and she is dealing with that grief, and she is also starting the early college program at UNC Chapel Hill. So she is a high schooler who will be attending classes at the university as like a pre-college program. But she ends up getting involved with this secret society that has a lot to do with like magic and Arthurian legends, and she starts to learn some things about her past and about her mom and about like her ancestors and how all of this stuff is interconnected. It has very much like total dark academia vibes. It is set in an academic world. It does have a little bit of romance. This is YA, and I really, really liked it. I cannot wait for the second book, but if you liked this book, you might like Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. So this is an adult fantasy novel, but it also is the dark academia secret society type of thing. This book follows Alex Stern, and she dropped out of school because of drugs and not so great boyfriends and different things like that, but she's offered a second chance when Yale offers to bring her in and let her study there basically for free. And so she ends up going, and the deal is that she will kind of spy on the university's secret societies, and she starts kind of getting involved in this one secret society that has a lot of really dark aspects to it. There is definitely magic involved, there is definitely something kind of occult involved, and she ends up caught in this world underneath the university that's completely unknown to the rest of the world. It is very similar to Legendborn in the secret society and the dark academia and the prestigious university and all of that. It's so much fun. I really, really liked this, and there's going to be a second book. I've been waiting forever for the second book. I think it comes out next year. I'm really excited for it because I did really like this. This one is more adult, so it doesn't read like a young adult novel, but it was still super fun. Next up, if you liked From Blood and Ash. So this is by Jennifer L. Armentrout, and this follows our main character, Poppy. And Poppy is a maiden in a world where basically that means that she is kept apart from society. She wears a veil and an all-white dress, and nobody's really allowed to like look at her or talk to her or be close to her, and she's supposed to be like kept very, very pure and untainted by society. But she ends up with this new guard, Hawk, and things start to get a little bit complicated for her, both personally and in the world as a whole. There is some evil forces that are coming together, there is some fantasy elements coming into play here, and her entire life is about to change. This is going to be a 6-book series, and it is very much a fantasy romance. And I think if you liked this book, I get very similar vibes from Kingdom of the Wicked. So this is more of a young adult series. I would say the first book, the whole series is marketed as young adult. I would say by book 2, it does lean more into the new adult realm. Maybe not so far as From Blood and Ash, but definitely I would not consider the second book young adult anymore personally. But this book follows our main character, Amelia, and she had a twin sister, and her twin sister is brutally murdered, and she is absolutely determined to get revenge for her sister's death. So she ends up calling a demon, a prince of hell, to help her. She is a witch, so she performs this little ritual to get a prince of hell to help her get revenge and find out who murdered her sister. But obviously calling on a prince of hell is like a really bad idea, so lots of things start to go wrong. Another fantasy romance, lots of mystery, lots of intrigue. This is by Kerri Maniscalco, so if you liked Stalking Jack the Ripper, very similar writing style. Like, her writing style is very similar in both books. Really enjoyed both, but if you like From Blood and Ash, I do think you would like this one. Next up, we have Gallant by V.E. Schwab. So this book follows Olivia, and she does not speak, and she has been orphaned and living in essentially an orphanage for most of her life, and she basically relies on her mother's journal for like comfort, but her mother's journal shows her mom's like progression into what looks like insanity. So there's a lot of very confusing things in there, and then one day she gets a letter from her mom's family inviting her back to her mom's childhood home, Gallant, which is this very mysterious house. But when she shows up, no one there remembers sending her this letter, and they have no idea why she's there or who sent for her, and some very suspicious things start happening. This is young adult, could be borderline middle grade, but it's a fantasy horror, so definitely fantasy elements with some horror aspects. And I think if you liked this book, you would also like House of Hollow. This is by Crystal Sutherland, and it is a young adult, also kind of a fantasy horror type of book. And this follows our main character, Iris, and she and her two older sisters went missing when they were children. They were gone for a month, and when they came back, they had no idea where they had been. So they've always been this big mystery. But now she is 17 and her two older sisters are a few years older, and one of her sisters goes missing again, and she and the middle sister are determined to go find her, but a lot of things are very suspicious. Wherever they were seems to be kind of seeping back into their lives, and there's definitely some not quite normal circumstances happening here. So we definitely get some fantasy elements, definitely get some horror elements. I read this and Gallant very close together, and they just felt so similar. Like, the plots are different, but the vibes and the genres are very similar. Alright, next up. I actually don't own this book because this was another book that I personally didn't like, but a lot of people did, and I can see if you liked this book, why you would like the other one. And I did like the other one. So, the first book, if you liked Red Queen, I actually don't even remember what it's about. I know we've got elemental magic, and I know we've got like two groups, red blood and a different color blood, and this one person bleeds the wrong color, and so she's like brought into royalty, and it goes from there. But I just remember the elemental magic part really, and it feels kind of dystopian but in a fantasy setting. So if you liked Red Queen, I think you would like The Prison Healer. This is one of my favorite young adult fantasy novels, and this follows our main character, Kiva, and she is a healer at a prison called Zalandov, and she's also a prisoner and has been since she was 7 years old. And this is very much a story about a kingdom with rebels, and kind of almost feels dystopian without being dystopian. It's very much more fantasy than dystopian, but the rebel queen is brought into the prison and she is completely unconscious, but she is sentenced to the trial by ordeal, which are 4 elemental trials that no one has ever survived. But if you survive all 4, you get set free. So Kiva decides to take her place in these elemental trials. So if you like elemental magic or YA fantasy that kind of feels a little dystopian, you'll probably like both of these series. Next up, we have Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. This book follows Audrey Rose in the Victorian era, and she is a woman studying to be an autopsy doctor in a time when that was not really something that women did, so there's a lot of pushback there. But she ends up investigating the Jack the Ripper case, and it ends up bringing her a lot closer to home than she thought it would. And we have some really cute romance here. It's really fun. But if you liked this book, I really think that you would probably like The Beautiful. I don't have the book, I just have the dust jacket with me. But this is by Renee Ahdieh, and this follows Celine. And Celine has just moved to New Orleans in like the late 1700s, nope, the late 1800s, and she ends up getting kind of caught up in this mysterious underground world that she doesn't know a lot about, but there's definitely some mystery there, and some girls have gone missing and been found dead, and lots of mystery happening there. So we definitely have the same like historical thriller aspects in both series. This one has a little bit more of a paranormal aspect to it than Stalking Jack the Ripper, but they both have that like historical mystery detective thriller type of aspect. I really liked both. I also found the writing styles very similar in both, so if you like one, you'll probably like the other. Next up, we have Truly Devious by Maureen Johnson. This book is about an academy, Ellingham Academy, and the owner of this academy's wife and daughter went missing like years and years ago in the early 20th century, and all they found was a note signed Truly Devious, and it has been one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time. Now, in present day, Stevie Bell is attending Ellingham Academy and she is determined to solve this cold case. However, another murder happens and it may be connected, and so there's a lot more happening here than what she knows. This is a trilogy. It was pretty fun. It wasn't my favorite YA mystery ever, but it was a solid YA mystery that a lot of people like. I did, however, like the other series that I'm going to talk about. So if you liked this, I do think that you will like, or even if you liked the concept of that one, even if you didn't like the execution, if you like that type of book, I think you will like The Inheritance Games by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. So this follows Avery. And Avery is a high schooler who has a lot of plans for college, but not a lot of money. And suddenly she finds out that she is going to inherit billions from this eccentric billionaire who has died, and he wrote her into his will, and she has no idea why because she's never met the man. But once she gets there, she finds out that his entire family was basically left nothing, and they are pissed, and his entire mansion that she is required to live in is full of mystery and secret passages, and there's definitely some sort of riddle going on involving the will and involving the inheritance, and she definitely has a bigger part to play than she first thought. I really, really like the series. The third book comes out later this month, and I'm so excited to finish it. Next up, we have The Summer I Turned Pretty. This is by Jenny Han. Super popular, especially right now because the TV show just came out, but this follows Belly, and she has spent every summer of her entire life at the beach house with her mom and her brother and her mom's best friend and her two sons, Jeremiah and Conrad. And now Belly is 16 and some dynamics between her and these boys are changing a little bit, and things are gonna get very complicated from there. I love this series. I have a love-hate relationship with this series because I don't generally like love triangles, but I do love the summer vibes, and I still go back and forth on my choice and her choices in this book a lot. But if you liked this book and you like summer young adult romance vibes, I think you would really like My Life Next Door. This is by Huntley Fitzpatrick, and this follows our main character Samantha, and her mom is a senator and very like prim and proper and like strict and vacuums for fun kind of thing. And then next door live the Garretts, who are a huge family of like 8 kids. They're very chaotic, they can be a little bit messy, and they are basically the exact opposite of Samantha's family, and her mom hates them. But Samantha ends up meeting one of the older sons, Jace, and they strike up a friendship and then a little bit more, but some things start to go wrong, and her mom's not all that thrilled about this development, and it spirals from there. It's another really cute young adult summer romance. Very cute, very fun. I love this book. It's one of my favorite YA romances of all time. It is a standalone. There are a couple of companion novels about other characters, but this one's a standalone. So if you're looking for a solid young adult summer romance with the Summer I Turned Pretty vibes minus the love triangle, here you go. Alright, and then last we have The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So this book follows Jude, and she was, I think 7 years old when her parents were murdered, and she was dragged into the world of fairy. And now she is a teenager, and she is determined to find her place in the fairy world. She's determined to be useful, but she is a human, and fairies do not like humans, especially one of the princes, Cardan, who ruthlessly bullies her. But in order to create a place for herself here at court, she has to make some dangerous alliances and some tough decisions, and a lot of things start to kind of unravel from there. This is a young adult fantasy with a romance side plot. I would not call it a fantasy romance, but it does have a romance side plot. It is kind of a bully romance, and it can be very, very political. So if you like any of that, I do think if you liked this book, specifically if you liked Jude as a character and her personality and the dynamics between Jude and Cardan, I think you would like The Shadows Between Us by Trisha Levenseller. So this book follows Alessandra, and she is a very ambitious person. And she basically has 3 goals. She's going to make the Shadow King fall in love with her so that she can marry him, and then she's going to kill him and steal his throne. So we definitely get another one of those very ambitious, very strong female characters in this fantasy world. Again, with some romance. This one's a little bit more of a fantasy romance, but we still get a lot of that political intrigue and the inner court workings and all of that fun stuff from The Cruel Prince. So I would highly recommend both of these books. This one is a standalone. The Cruel Prince is a trilogy, but this one is a standalone. So if you're looking for something a little bit shorter but with similar vibes. So those are books that I would recommend if you liked really popular books that I see on BookTok and BookTube all the time. If you have a book that you would like me to recommend something for, like, hey, I liked this book, what would you recommend that's similar? Let me know in the comments. Or if you have another book that I should read based on one of these books or based on something you know I've read, let me know down in the comments. I'm happy to talk books, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye!
Oh my love.